Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some interesting source material in front of us today. We're going to be digging into a type of cyber threat that honestly feels particularly, well, nasty because it's designed to work even when you think you're doing everything right.
Yeah, it's a tricky one.
Today, we're tackling browser-in-the-middle attacks. You might see it written as BTM.
BTM.
So our goal here, using just these sources, is to really unpack this. What are these attacks? How do they actually, pull off the deception?
And crucially, what the sources say you can do about it, how to protect yourself.
Exactly. And this is important because, as the material makes clear, this isn't your standard attack. It's designed specifically to get around some common security measures.
That's right. You can think of it as sort of the next step, an evolution in how attackers try to intercept what you do online.
Okay.
It's not just about nabbing your password anymore. It's about hijacking your whole logged-in session.
Right.
Okay, let's get into the definition then, based on what we have here.
Yeah.
How do these sources actually define a browser-in-the-middle attack? What makes it different?
Well, the core idea, and this is what's really interesting, is that the sources describe BTM as a situation where you, the user,
Yeah.
you're not actually connecting directly to the website you think you are.
Wait, what? How does that work?
Instead, you're interacting with a browser session that's running remotely, one that the attacker controls.
So let me get this straight. I type in my bank's web address, or maybe I click a link I trust, and I see the normal login page. Everything looks right, but I'm somehow not really there.
Exactly that. You're seeing the legitimate site, yes, but it's being sort of piped through the attacker's own setup, like a relay.
Okay.
And the sources make a key distinction here from, traditional man-in-the-middle attacks, BiTM.
Right, I've heard of those.
BiTM generally doesn't need to install any malware on your computer.
And it's not necessarily messing with, like, low-level network stuff. It works higher up, at the application layer. It's tricking your interaction with the website itself.
Which means it would be really hard to spot from my end, right? My computer wouldn't necessarily show any signs of infection.
Precisely. That's the goal. It's designed to look and feel completely seamless. You wouldn't necessarily notice anything strange.
Okay.
And this is where it gets, well, really concerning. A critical point these sources hammer home. BiTM attacks can steal your session token after you've successfully authenticated, even with multi-factor authentication.
Hold on. You mean after I've put in my password and my fingerprint or the code from my app?
Yes. That's exactly what the sources are highlighting. Even if you've done the MFA step correctly, the attacker, because they're relaying that session, they can grab the valid session token that gets generated right after you log in.
And with that token,
They can basically just hijack your already authenticated session, often within seconds. They don't need your password or your MFA code at that point because they have the token that says this person is already logged in.
wow. Okay, that's genuinely alarming. So they aren't like breaking the MFA. They're just slipping in right behind me after I've unlocked the door.
That's a really good analogy, actually. Yeah. They steal the permission slip, the session token that proves you're allowed to be there.
Okay. So how does this usually start? How do I, as a user, end up in this attacker-controlled session without realizing it?
Well, the material we have points pretty consistently to phishing as the typical starting point.
Ah, phishing again. Okay.
Yeah. It usually kicks off when you click a malicious link, maybe an email, a text message, could even be a dodgy ad you see somewhere.
And when I click that link, it doesn't go straight to, say, my bank's real website.
No. According to these sources, that link directs you first to the attacker's server.
Right.
And that server acts as the middleman, the relay. It connects to the actual legitimate website, fetches the real content, and shows it to you. But crucially, while you're looking at this relayed version and typing things in...
My username, my password.
Exactly. Username, password, maybe doing that MFA step. The attacker server is just sitting there, capturing all of it in real time.
And grabbing that session token the second it appears.
Precisely. As soon as the real site says, okay, login successful, here's your token, the attacker snatches it.
So I'm effectively just handing them everything they need on a silver platter while thinking I'm logging in normally.
That's the mechanism described here, yes. It gives them the keys to your session.
Yeah, this really drives home why just having, say, antivirus isn't always enough. So the sources do say these are hard to spot once they're happening.
That they do.
So what can we do? What does the material suggest for prevention?
Okay, so the sources outline what's really a multi-layered approach. They stress that there's no single magic bullet against BiTM.
Makes sense.
But the absolute first line of defense, given how these usually start, is that vigilance against phishing.
Back to basics. Don't click weird links.
Exactly. Don't click suspicious links. Don't open unexpected attachments. If you can avoid that initial click, you stop the whole attack before it even gets going.
Okay, critical first step.
Mm.
What else do the sources recommend?
Verifying website authenticity. This one directly counters that relay mechanism we talked about.
How so?
The sources advise things like manually typing in the web address for sensitive sites, banking, email, instead of just clicking a link someone sent you.
Right, go direct.
And critically, always check for HTTPS, that padlock icon in the address bar. And maybe even take a second to look at the site security certificate, make sure it's valid and actually issued to the bank or service you expect.
And doing that helps because
Because it helps ensure you're making a direct, secure connection to the real site, not the attacker's relay server. You're sort of bypassing their setup.
got it. Check the address, check the lock. Seems simple, but important. Now, you mentioned MFA earlier. How does that fit into prevention if the token can be stolen after?
That's a really important clarification. The sources are very clear. You should still use strong, unique passwords and absolutely enable multi-factor authentication wherever possible.
Okay.
Yes, we talked about how BTM can steal the session token after MFA, but, and this is key, MFA is still a vital defense against lots of other types of attacks.
Like simple password theft, for example.
Exactly. Things that don't involve this kind of live session relay. So keep using MFA. It dramatically cuts down your risk from many other common threats. It's a crucial layer, even if it's not foolproof specifically against this one BTM technique.
Okay, good. So layers of defense makes sense. What about keeping our actual devices secure? Does that help?
Yes, keeping software and devices updated is definitely listed as important here.
Like browser updates, OS updates.
All of it. Browsers, operating systems, any plugins you use, your security software. Keeping those patched and up to date closes security holes that attackers might exploit, maybe to deliver the phishing link more effectively or potentially to help with their relay infrastructure somehow.
Right. Close the doors. And what about secure connections generally?
The sources recommend preferring secure protocols. So looking for HTTPS, using things like SSL/TLS, maybe using a VPN when appropriate. They even mention browser extensions like HTTPS everywhere, which try to force secure connections. Basically, anything that ensures a properly verified end-to-end encrypted connection makes it harder for that attacker relay to sit in the middle unnoticed. It reinforces that manual check of the URL and the certificate.
Okay. The sources also mentioned network and endpoint security tools, didn't they? Like firewalls?
They did, yeah. Things like firewalls, good antivirus, or endpoint detection software, intrusion detection systems. These are all listed as part of the defense strategy.
More for businesses maybe, but relevant for individuals too.
Definitely relevant for individuals with good security software. These tools can help monitor traffic for suspicious patterns, maybe block known phishing sites if one slips through, or detect malware if the attack does involve some secondary payload. It's another layer.
So we've got technical stuff, but it all started with a person clicking something, right? Is there a human element in the prevention advice?
Absolutely. And the sources really highlight this. User awareness is huge.
Just knowing this stuff exists.
Knowing it exists, understanding how it works, that relay concept, the session theft, and being trained on spotting phishing tactics, it just makes you a much harder target for that initial deceptive click. Social engineering is often the weakest link.
Makes sense. Educate yourself and others. And lastly, there was something about monitoring for weird activity.
Right. This one's noted in the material mainly as something organizations can do.
Okay.
Monitoring login records, session activity, looking for anomalies. Like, did a user log in from London and then 2 seconds later their session seems to be active from somewhere completely different? Or is there unusual activity happening within a logged-in session? It's a way to potentially detect an ongoing BTM attack, even if the user can't see it.
Okay, so pulling all these strands together from the sources, what's the main takeaway on defending against BiTM?
It seems pretty clear, based on this material, that it has to be a combination. You need the technical controls, the updates, the secure protocols, the security software, but layered on top of that, and maybe even more critical, is your own personal vigilance.
Being careful, being suspicious.
Yeah, being suspicious of unexpected links or messages, really verifying where you are before you enter sensitive info, and just understanding that this kind of attack is possible.
You know, looking at the bigger picture, this BiTM attack really shows how cybersecurity is constantly evolving, doesn't it? That cat and mouse game.
It really does.
Attackers see we're using strong passwords and MFA, so they adapt. They find a new angle, like targeting the session itself.
Exactly. It forces everyone, individuals and organizations, to think beyond just protecting credentials.
Yeah.
We have to think about securing the entire interactive session online.
Which does raise a bit of a tricky question, though. If these attacks, according to the sources, look so seamless once you're in that fake session, and they're hard for you, the user, to just spot visually, how much can we really rely on just looking out for something suspicious while we're banking or emailing? Doesn't the most effective prevention really have to happen before we even get to that interaction?
That's, I think, the core challenge this attack method presents, based on what we've read here. The strong emphasis in the sources on preventing the initial phishing click and on verifying the site's authenticity before you log in. It really suggests that the most powerful defenses are indeed front-loaded, stopping it before it starts.
Well, that was quite the deep dive into browser-in-the-middle attacks, drawing just from the source material we had. We've looked at what they are, that hidden relay hijacking your session.
How they work, capturing everything in real time, and crucially, how they can steal that session token right after you authenticate, even with MFA.
And we've walked through the prevention strategies laid out in the sources, that layered approach. Vigilance against phishing, first and foremost.
All right, then verifying sites, using MFA anyway, keeping things updated, using secure connections, having security tools, and general user awareness.
The key takeaway seems to be, based purely on this material, combining that personal caution, especially about links and site verification, with solid foundational security practices.
That seems to be the message. Yeah, it's about being smart before you connect and having the technical backstops in place too.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We really hope that understanding the mechanics of BiTM attacks, as described in these sources, gives you a clearer picture and maybe encourages you to think a bit more critically about your everyday online interactions.
Stay sharp out there.
Indeed. Stay safe.